Hello, everyone. Philip Lee returning with a new episode of Civil War Chat. Today is Tuesday, the 17th of May, 2022. Our topic today is the war in the West. But first, let me tell you that you're going to get a lot of what I'm going to cover in this episode is also in the book, The Dreadful Frauds, Critical Race Theory and Identity Politics by Philip Lee. $16 at Amazon. If you'd like to get a autographed copy, it's $20 directly from me. Just email me, Phil, PHIL _ Lee, LEIGH at me.com. I know some of you may be reacting like, oh, Phil, you talk to us about these books all the time, but this one really, don't ignore it, because it's a dead certainty that if critical race theory and identity politics would gain traction to become the dominant interpretation or the accepted interpretation of American history and the forces that shape our current society, there's going to be no Confederate monuments in the South. They'll all be destroyed, and much of Southern history will also be treated as though it deserves cultural genocide. So let me go ahead now and get started on the presentation. The War in the West. Portland, Oregon was one of the American cities that British author Douglas Murray visited during a promotional tour for his newest book, The War in the West, which argues that today's critics of Western civilization are too harsh. By interpreting everything through the lens of race, they get only a monotonously distorted history of the West, and especially America. Those who reframe the story of America's founding through the perspective of race, as does the New York Times' 1619 Project, disdain traditional heroes for being guilty of the twin sins of slavery and colonization. During a tour of that town, Murray concluded that Portland's city leaders were among such critics because he saw no statues to heroes such as Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln. Instead, he saw vacant stone plinths where statues had once stood. During a YouTube interview, he remarked humorously that Portland was the town that one should visit if one wishes to see vacant plinths in the city parks. Well, should his book tour take him to Richmond, Murray would discover that the former Confederate capital would be a town where tourists might visit if they want to see a city where both the statues and the plinths have been removed. That's because the hatred of America harbored by the municipality's current leaders is even more vicious than the politically far left Portland. Richmond's leaders interpret everything through race. They do not realize that it is a wound that must be allowed to heal if they are ever to put their resentment behind them and move forward. The descendants of Confederate soldiers also had resentments due to the regional destruction caused by the Civil War and the poverty that followed it for 100 years thereafter. After Union veterans built monuments to their dead in Southern states, the Confederate veterans and their daughters put up monuments of their own. But in one dedication speech after another, the Confederate descendants showed that it was in a spirit of national unity that they did this. Quite a number of the referred to the sentiment of gratitude for reconciliation within our one common country. And what I'm referring to is quite a number of the dedication speeches referred to the sentiment of gratitude for reconciliation. Quote, within our one common country, close quote. Unlike Richmond's present leaders, the descendants of Confederate soldiers learned that gratitude was the only way to overcome resentment. Thus, they united with their former enemies to fight for America in 1898, 1918, and 1941, as well as in later years. In fact, they typically volunteered more eagerly than the youths from other parts of the country. They did so even after George M. Cohan insulted them by referring to them as, quote, Yanks, close quote, in America's most popular song of the First World War. Although the scab of slavery had long been dormant, Richmond's leaders recently began to picket it for the deliberate purpose of reopening the wound. They knew that a reopened wound would arouse voter resentment among Blacks and their allies in the among the elite leaders of the American culture today, and would put shame in the ordinary whites. It would shame them into acquiescence. Consequently, they continually, the Richmond leaders continually picket the scab so that it might never heal. Every morning they pick at it and reopen it. It's never going to heal that way. Now they intend to unleash critical race theory so that white children can be taught in Richmond schools that their skin color defines them as endemically racist, while Black children will be taught that they have no independent agency and must therefore depend upon the government, a presumably benevolent government, but actually a sinister government, to provide a collective equality of outcomes for them. LeVar Stoney and his followers do not realize what Douglas Murray knows. If America is to survive, her citizens must learn at least a modicum of gratitude. Murray argues that if Americans lived even a few years in another country, they would realize 2 points. First, they are lucky to be Americans. Second, that luck was earned by their ancestors who deserve respect, not disdain. We stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. We disdain them at our own peril. And finally, it should be realized the whole world, certainly the whole free world, depends upon America to move forward. A suicidal self-destruction of our country would be a calamity for the entire world. Okay, that's my talk for today. Again, the dreadful frauds, critical race theory and identity politics. Really, get them hooked. It's going to enlighten, it's going to give you information you need if you want to defend Southern heritage and Confederate monuments. Okay, that's our show for today. Thanks for watching.